All right, everybody. Don't know if I am live as of yet. All right. We're starting to get some things trickling in, so we're good. We got one on YouTube, and hopefully we are now live on Twitch and as well as on Kick. Hope you guys are having a phenomenal start to the day, or end of the day rather. Just going to go through a few ticker symbols, and then what I think would be prudent of us to do is apparently still in this day and age, 2025, 8 years on after the first launch, people think that Rocket Lab is still just a launch company. And so with that, we'll do the due diligence that Chris Patel never could. We'll go through the actual investor deck presentation from 2023. We will go through the website. So if you guys aren't interested in Rocket Lab, I apologize. Before we dive into that, we'll probably just look at a few different companies that I follow. Sorry if you're not a follower of them. First one being Rocket Lab, 2330. How are we doing over the past month? 70%? That's not bad. What about other babies that we've been doing over the past month, 3 months? Past month, Venture Global, 67%, 85. Past 3 months. Congrats, people that were bottom feeding on this bad boy. Hopefully you continue to do well on this one. I think it's interesting. I mean, I wouldn't be rushing out to buy it here at 16 after an 80% run in 3 months, but depends on your time horizon, I guess. So there's that one. Let's just, how the whole market. I know there's some chit chat about Uncle Donnie in China. So, okay, we ended at 600. Okay, it's a little bit worse than I was expecting. I was kind of expecting to hang up a little bit. All right, so 1% on the week, 3.5% of the month, 7.5% the past 3 months. How are we doing year to date? 2% year to date. Can't complain on that one. Almost back to Feb highs. Almost. Let's see who has jumped in so far. Appreciate the 31 of you that have already joined in to hang out with me. We got Midwest, we got BD Fool's Gold, we got BD Ray, Jumpman, we got Hot Coal, we got Peyton, we got BD Brad, we got Miss Lisa, we got Shem Pasta over on Twitch, we got Ben, Mike K, and BD Ray again, BD Midwest. Really hope you guys are having a good one. Rob, what's going on, my friend? Really hope you guys are having a good day. The markets to me have been, I'll just say, favorable. We are and have been pushing against all-time highs. It really just depends on the day, depending on what stock is up. So if you're having Rocket Lab up, you're having Venture Global up, it's really helping. Let's see how I ended up today. Am I still... It was yesterday or 2 days ago. I hit an all-time high. Let's see. I don't know if we pushed that hard today. No. So I'm down 1.5% from all-time highs. And I think a lot of that has to do with Rocket Lab being back a little bit. So that'll be that, unfortunately. And Bitcoin's pulling back a little bit too. We got to keep these things going. I don't know why Bitcoin's being a little bit of a pain in the bee, as some may call it. It doesn't make sense to me. Yeah, but this looks very bullish. Look at this graph right here. Obviously, this is winter, and then you see this. Like, have we hit the top? I don't know. You tell me. So I think we have a good couple pushes still left in us before we call it. But within the last month, we didn't outpace this 110,000. So I feel like we need to in the next month or so. Otherwise, this might drag on a little bit. So there's that bad boy. Yeah, you can buy. I was talking to somebody. Somebody's asking me, like, Matt, where do you buy your crypto? And I just said, I just buy it on Robinhood, man. I really do. Even though, like, it's transparent, you're paying 0.59% for the spread. But if you're that concerned about it, put a limit order in, But I think everything's okay in that respect. Like, some people were saying they had to pay like a 1.5, which is kind of crazy. So I guess it really just all depends on what you guys are doing, what you're doing. When retire. Yeah, there you go. Let's see what else is there. We got good job. What's going on, my guy? So let's get into what other stocks do I have in the portfolio? Oh yeah, everyone's been chatting about Amazon and Waymo lately. Let's see how my Amazon is doing. Still down from earlier this year. What about my Google? People are chirping up about Google paying off employees. It looks like we're up in the up. 177. I mean, we're not the 230 or whatever that we got to, or 205. I'm thinking of Amazon. 205 that we were earlier this year. Check out that bad boy. I thought we were headed to 230 in February. People come around. It comes in cycles. Comes in cycles. People thought it was going to zero back in November 2021. It dipped all the way to the 80s. This is when I was buying pretty aggressive. So my position's up pretty good on that. And speaking of another winner that's been doing well, I've been thinking about messaging this lady, Christine Barone, to come on. I need to reach out to their investor relations. These guys are up 35% in the past, or the year to date, 82, 83% in the past year. Still down from all-time highs, though. They hit a peak of 85. I was like, what the heck? This is right after their full year earnings call. And I think that, they announced that they were potentially going to do some food. They announced that they were going to potentially do, where they had kind of gotten to the place where they're expecting to be cash flow neutral-ish in 2025. So that's very bullish. And I don't know if you guys know this about Dutch Bros. $12 billion company at this point. It's been profitable. So we're talking about been profitable since been profitable. So at that point, you're starting to say, when is this thing going to get some accolades? When is it going to potentially get enough market cap to make it in the S&P, or what's next? And so kind of curious to see what ends up happening with that. The price to earnings does not look good. I'll say that. But if you look at it from a cash in the business, cash out of the business, these guys are doing well. And I'm very curious to see if they grow another 20, 30% next year in 2026. They really don't have a lot of cash, or debt. They really don't. They have $285 million in debt, $12 billion company, $11.5 billion company today. But their debt to EBITDA at this point is getting close to a 1, which is pretty low for a company really trying to grow. So it's interesting. Once these guys, I'm very curious for these guys, the bros. What is the move with respect to these guys? They're going to make on upwards of 260 to 270 million in EBITDA. They're going to spend probably 50 million less than that in capex. And so I was actually having this conversation with Hot Cole. We were sending some voice notes back and forth yesterday. And my question, which I would love to get Christine on and chat with about her thoughts. We know that they put out publicly 2,029 stores in 2029. So to give people some context, last quarter they hit, or maybe it was earlier this quarter, but in the 1Q earnings call, they talked about opening their 1,000th store, 1,000 stores. And these guys are popping up everywhere. They're about to start popping up in Indiana, Georgia. They already just started popping up in Florida. And if you're in Texas, you've probably seen them already. And so it makes you kind of question, at what point, are these guys going to start really churning out more cash? And they got 25 to 30% gross margins, which is pretty good. And then they have about $200 million in drag associated with SG&A. Maybe it's closer to 240 now for SG&A, sales and general administrative. And so, you add on a couple stores, it adds a lot of value. These guys get about $2 million per store in terms of unit volume. So you add another 1,000 stores, you're talking about $2 billion, and you're talking about 25 to 30% margin. That's going to be a pretty good chunk of change. It's 600, potentially 800 million to basically the EBITDA that they can use, assuming that their SG&A doesn't grow out of control, which it might. but I assume that they're going to have a lot of efficiencies associated with. So you start thinking about it, they're already at close to 2 million in revenue, if not already surpassing it. You're going to get another 2 million in revenue in the next 4 years. You're going to be talking about potentially closing in on $1 billion worth of EBITDA. And they only have $285 million worth of debt. So that debt is due 2027, by the way. So, I mean, they do have a hurdle for that debt, but fingers crossed, rates come down. These guys aren't hurting, right? And we're talking about a debt to EBITDA of 1 at this point. So, in terms of leverage, very low leverage. And they're growing. I think they grew 29% in terms of revenue, quarter over quarter, not quarter over quarter, I'm sorry, year over year. So very curious to see. The second quarter and third quarters are generally their best quarters in terms of how much they grow year over year. Just because they just get more clients in the summertime when it's a little bit warmer out. I know I like a nice cold Rebel when it's getting a little warmer out. Driving around, beautiful sunshine. Got some tunes on, sunglasses, living the dream. So I don't know. Somebody's asked me, 12 billion, it's expensive. It's up 83% or whatever in the past year. I hear it. That's all real good. I understand that. But we're talking about a company that in 4 years' time is going to be churning out $1 billion in EBITDA. And these guys are going to be opening up 4,000 stores, they've said. So 4,000 stores, in the medium-ish term. What does that mean? 10 years, 5 years? I don't know. Obviously, it's not 5 years because 2,029 stores by 2029, right? But, what does that mean? Does that mean by 2035, we should expect them to have close to 4,000 stores? It makes me scratch my head a little bit. How soon is it to drop this one? It's been turning really well. And, on any big pullbacks, I'm pretty upset I didn't buy any more. I might have added a few shares. I'd actually have to go back and check. What was that in the April-March timeframe? What was that? Yeah, April-March timeframe. But it pulled back to the low 50s. It's really only been on a drive since. I would anticipate this as institutional buying as they've become more profitable, as they age themselves closer to being eligible for things like the S&P 500. Interesting enough. Speaking of the S&P 500, Venture Global, if you guys know this or not, is a profitable company. So in this respect, they had their first actual quarterly earnings in 1Q. So for the full year 24 earnings that they had in February, technically they weren't public. So I don't know how that works, right? When do you start counting profitable quarters? Do you have to be public the whole time? So they went public in January. So even though we reported fourth quarter earnings or full year 2024 earnings, they weren't public at all in 2024. So is that able to be counted? I don't know. But what I can anticipate is this company is very profitable. There's no likelihood of it going negative in terms of EPS unless they get their interest rate swaps completely wrong. So if anything, they should be growing EPS, growing EBITDA out to the end of the year. And so at what point does VG come out of the table to join the S&P 500? And who's it going to kick out? You're talking about a $30-some billion company churning out potentially over $1 billion a year, maybe more, $1.5 billion in net income. I'm not exactly sure where it's going to be in terms of net income, but I know it's going to make $6, $7, $8 billion in EBITDA. So price to EBITDA, what are you gonna do? And not only that, but they're not even fully ramped up for the full year. So when it comes to 2026, what's the run rate look like for 2026 when you have 4 full quarters of Plaquemines commissioning cargoes? And will they actually get some CP2 commissioning cargoes? We'll see. You guys potentially saw the news. These guys just actually started construction officially, even though they've already spent $5 billion on this facility. And it's going to be a big one. It's going to make them as big, if not slightly bigger, than Cheniere. And Cheniere is a $55, $60 billion company. So, then they have other facilities that they're either going to expand or build on top of that. So the future is bright. Venture Global, in terms of the long-term growth, I could see it being worth over 100 billion in the future. And currently we're sitting at 30 odd billion. So is it a run and absolutely jump in, both feet? Is it going to go to 100 billion tomorrow? Likely not. The pendulum always swings. I feel like the pendulum was complete dog shit literally 3 months ago, and even probably bottomed out less than 3 months ago. As April 7th looks like it almost dipped below $6 or into the $6 per share area. And so I added it up enough. Not enough. I added up a lot. I did not add up enough, is what I was trying to say. And but it's close to my next position. Close enough to my next position. Yeah. Oh, actually, it is bigger than my next position. Slightly bigger than my next position. Slightly bigger than my next position. That's good to know. That's good to know. 77 of you guys in here. Awesome for you to join. Curious to see who else has joined since then. Wen Lambo should have bought at 30. I don't know if you're talking about the bros or what. We got June B. VG is going to double again soon. Hey, man, I guess it really depends on what you're looking for. I think it could double. Legacy Zero, what's going on, my guy? I could see it doubling again. 3 years, easy. So we're talking going to 30, 35 bucks. And that would probably put it at close to a 70, $80 billion market cap. And that the fun part is, man, is like it's when you have return on equity like these guys do of 30 north of 30%, why pay down debt? You know what I mean? Like if you could buy back stock or invest into the business, or it's like at that point, like why, if you can make return on equity of that much, why pay down the debt? And you can buy back your own stock or do something like that that really moves the needle. And not only that, but like, do you want to pay down debt at favorable levels? And that kind of gets you to actually think, like, what are the debt interest rates for VG? They're actually not super favorable. But anyway, just some food for thought. Okay, so the real reason why I wanted to have this is because I think a lot of people still have misnomers as to what Rocket Lab actually does. And so apologies to the people that are joining in. This is going to be probably boring for most of you. What I might actually do is start with the Investor Day presentation from 2022. And then I know Amit is also going to do an ASTS review here in a few half hour or an hour or so at about 9 p.m. Eastern. So where are we here? I'm going to start in 2022. I believe that's when the first investor presentation came out. Fourth quarter financial results, Investor Day, and Neutron update. Okay, here we go. And so to give people some context, at this point in 2022, and this was something I'm looking forward to, like when they actually gave a next Investor Day, because a lot has transpired in a positive manner since this 2022 Investor Day and Neutron update. And this is when I truly was really starting to believe in the company. Oops, I'm not in the right presentation now, am I? And this is when I really started to believe in the company. Was at this point, like we had just SPAC'd or de-SPAC'd, and we had about $700 some million in cash, and they start using this cash to start buying other companies. And I'm like, what the F is going on, right? So this is 2020, 2021. I'm like, why are they doing it to buy these damn satellite companies? It doesn't make any sense. You're a launch company. Your name's Rocket Lab. Just launch the damn rockets in the air, right? So I just didn't understand what was going on. So come this investor day presentation, and I'm like, okay, who are all these nerds? What do they do? Let them explain to me why they're not just focusing on launch, right? And then so I watched this live, not live. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. I watched the webcast of it later on, and this is where I really started to see the picture of like what is going on within the company and what their long-term strategy was. And so this is where you start to see the true vision unveiled of Rocket Lab. Before 2017, 2018 timeframe, it was just this guy, this launch a Neutron, launch Electron and just get after it. Small launch is the way. People aren't going to want to launch more than 300 kilogram, 500 kilogram vessels. So we're going to take care of 60 to 70% of the market. Whoever, like the Falcon 9 or whatever, isn't going to be around long enough. People aren't going to be launching things that big, etc. So I'm like, okay. Well, what is the vision? Open access to space to improve life on Earth. Okay, that makes sense. And so they start talking about space systems and like having some sort of like, basically the launch piece was just like the beginning. I'm like, oh, okay. So I start listening in. So they were talking about launch being the keys to space and how you really need, in order to truly win in the space component aspect of the business, is really start to build and own and operate kind of your own end-to-end sort of space company. So they have launch, space systems, and applications, uniquely positioned to access expanding space applications market. So Rocket Lab is bringing all three together, streamlining space as one of the most advanced technology and service providers to the growing space industry. We're delivering real hardware and real missions to real customers right now. And I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. And then I get to this slide, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is where I start to get it. 2022 timeframe, September. I'm watching this, and Adam, like, this is the first time I really like knew of Adam and really started paying attention. And Adam absolutely killed this presentation, by the way. I encourage anybody that wants to, if they still have the recording up, to watch it. I was like, okay, like this guy, he has gusto. He has this confidence of presentation in his voice that I really loved and kind of understood it. And so, like, okay, what the hell do these guys spend $300-400 million on acquiring all these companies? So then I'm like, okay, they're going to start sending satellites to space. What does that mean? Satellite design, satellite components, flight software, launch systems, launch services, and then managing things when they're in orbit. Okay, that makes sense ish. And at this point, keep in mind, these are the numbers, right? 30 launches at this point. So this is kind of like I think I got in on launch 17 or 20, early 20s. So that's when I first started kind of knowing about Rocket Lab. And so, to me, this was a little bit in. And at this point, even, I didn't even remember that they announced the Wallops launch area at this point. But second most frequently launched in the US, obviously behind the Falcon 9 at this point. And keep in mind, it was only 4 or 5 years in from the first Electron launch. So these guys were already moving and shaking by 2022 timeframe. They have 5 mission control centers, 1,300 people. They'd bought 4 different companies. They have 3 Photon, their own satellites in space, different states across the United States. And they just had basically put a crap ton of hardware already into orbit. And I think one of the key things that they stated, this might have been when they stated it, was specifically at this time, they had stated that something like 45 or 50%, because I think it's higher now, but 45, 50% of things launched, and it might be a US launch, but 45 to 50% of the things that launched into space have a Rocket Lab logo on it some way, shape, or form. And I think a lot of it had to do with acquiring these four companies that that we're going to be talking about, right? Because at the moment, prior to this, they did have some internal components that they had built and space buses, etc., but they didn't necessarily have Solero and some of the other businesses. Okay. So by this point, $380 billion TAM forecasted to grow to 1 trillion by 2030. Curious to see how that's going, by the way. I feel like it's slowed down a little bit. Keep in mind, this is when like a lot of money was flowing around 2021, 2022, and things obviously with interest rates have slowed down a little bit. So curious to see. I mean, I'm not saying that we won't eventually get to 1 trillion. I believe that, but I'm curious to see what the TAM looks like. So launch itself, $20 billion TAM, space systems itself, $44 billion TAM. The big TAM was space applications, always was. And they were hoping, kind of like what SpaceX is doing with their own rockets, to be able to exploit, is what they're saying, this. So Rocket Lab remaining out in front, continuing record relentless execution, building momentum across launch, space systems, etc. So at this point, they had delivered launches 15 days apart from each other. And actually, let me pull up my spreadsheet because it might be able to show maybe slightly in depth, like where they were. They're probably in like this, like maybe this area here. So still improvements as where we are today, but their turnaround times are getting into the 20-ish average. So you can see these red, this is 31, 33. This is trailing 5 launches, right? So you can see some of them are, this was 15 days, 22, etc. So I took the trailing 5 launches, the distance between the time between launches, and kind of had this red line kind of as a trail to kind of monitor. And here you have the 24 hours launch, which was really cool. But back to the presentation itself. Where'd it go? Here we go. Expanding on addressable launch market with the bringing development of Neutron, the constellation launcher. So you were talking about launching constellations back then. Construction underway in the Neutron production complex, launch site secured, and vehicle hardware already in test. And increasing mission heritage on Rocket Lab satellites and components. Successful Photon moon mission for NASA has significantly increased interest from civil, defense, etc., and operates satellites for low Earth orbit and interplanetary missions. Increasing space systems capability to capture more of addressable space market. Through acquisitions and in-house development, we now deliver a significant launch and small satellite supply chain. This vertical integration enables us to offer customers schedule security and attractive pricing, resulting in significant contract wins, including a $143 million subcontract by the MDA to build Globalstar. And I think that's what put a lot of people on the map with Rocket Lab. Was everyone was talking about this Globalstar contract, Globalstar. And this was obviously bid out because of Apple. Apple wanted Globalstar to bid it out. And then Globalstar said, hey, we're the prime contractor for this. We need others to help in our stead. And so they did. And so then this was the board at the time. So you had a bunch of different people in the board and executive team. Sorry, this is the executive team. And so you had Doug Sinclair, who obviously was purchased into the company, and a few other folks that probably were purchased into the company through Solero and Sinclair and a bunch of other different companies as well. Like a lot of these are obviously synonymous with the space industry in the United States. People from SpaceX, NASA, General Dynamics, Broadcom, which I think was Adam Spice, and ULA, Oracle. So they captured a lot of talent just by bolting on those other companies that they acquired. So Electron, we won't talk too much about this. I think this is evident. Like at this point, this is really cool to see all the different badges. But May 2017 was their first launch. And then 6 months later, they followed it up. 8 months later, they followed it up with the second launch. And here we are today, getting about a launch, almost 2 launches a month but some months we go without a launch. So on average, we are let me see, currently at about 17 days between launches. So we go launches very quickly, and then we take a pause, and then we go launches very quickly, take a pause. Like previously, we just hit our cadence of 7 days. So, which I might actually have to update this because we actually launched it today, 6/11/2025. And so that drags the average from 17.4 over the trailing 5 launches to 17.6. So we're up to 18 days instead of 17. So okay, so what have they done so far, right? For specifically for Electron at this point. So 9 successful orbital launches, 100% mission success rate since they despacked. Moon mission for NASA. Heaviest payload on the Electron was 320 kilograms. They did capture some electrons. They were capturing it. They were having like a parachute and trying to capture it with a helicopter. They've since kind of stopped that. We'll see what ends up happening in the future with that. And even back then, these guys were ahead, right? Astra, for those of you guys that remember, were really trying to get up in orbit. And by this time, they had only launched like 3 times in total. They might have launched 1 more time or 2 more times before they inevitably had to shut the doors. Firefly now starting to pick up some steam with some of their launches, but by September 2022 timeframe, it was mostly just Rocket Lab. Obviously, Virgin Orbit is now defunct, and Rocket Lab has bought part of Virgin Orbit, specifically for I think some of their Long Beach facilities in California. So, what does this mean, right? So when you actually look at advertised capability versus what they actually showed, they said they're going to launch 320 kilograms. They launched 320 kilograms versus everybody else talked about what they're going to launch, but they actually launch anything. Even, I guess, I'm curious to see if the Astra 4 actually ended up launching any payload at all. I don't know. So yes, 15 days between launch, which is pretty cool. What else is there? Yeah, this is what I started to get pretty bullish. So schedule flexibility. They have 132 launch slots available annually. By operating our own exclusive use launch pads, we easily shuffle the launch manifest to support customer schedule changes. They have 3 launch pads, 2 continents, and they have rideshare options, regular rideshare missions enabling small customers to share costs. And so I looked at this and immediately start putting, my numbers hat on and saying, okay, imagine you get $10 million a launch and then you launch it 132 times. Boom. Here you are in terms of making $1.3 billion a year in revenue, plus whatever you can get from space systems, right? And that's before Neutron. Well, I don't think we've met that hype as of yet, but my hope is that this year we launch 24 times, 22 to 24 times. That's kind of where I'm at. I'd be happy with 20 because I think last year we got to 16. So as long as you're able to continue to strive for slightly more and get slightly better, I'm okay with it. So yeah, here you see Launch Complex 1, Launch Complex 2, in Walbs, Virginia. Pretty cool stuff with that. Talking about new customers. Yeah, so selected by confidential customer to provide dedicated launch services on Electron from LC2 in 2023. And I wasn't sure at this point had they announced haste yet. I don't think they had. So I'm curious if this was knowingly going to be haste or if this was a different contract. So we still don't see too many Electrons launched out of Wallops. It's mostly just haste, which I guess technically is Electron, but different story for a different day. Here's all the different customers. We don't need to go through that. So at this point, they had launched a couple different launches for different companies, and so that obviously helps feed. Jesus Christ. Somebody texted me a crazy message. Um, so yes, you can see the different. And at this point, we've launched for Black Sky a billion times. Kinesis, Inspective, IQPS was just today. NASA as well. So we have a lot of different missions. And reusability was the cool thing back then in terms of being able to get the Electron recovered. And so you can see the red on the recovered Neutron, and the hope was is that we'd eventually fly a fully recovered Electron, and unfortunately, I think that they put a pause to it. I believe they tested one reused Rutherford, and so after launch 50, they had only launched 499 because think about it, they use 9 Rutherford engines for the main, and then they use a single Rutherford vacuum optimized Rutherford for stage 2. So all right, so into space systems. So the strategy there was everything that goes into space should have a Rocket Lab logo on it, which I thought was like, oh shit. Like that if you think about Rocket Lab just being a space company, and now you're sitting there being like every launch company, sorry, every company that launches something into space is now going to have a Rocket Lab logo on it. It's pretty wild in that respect to be like, oh shit, right? These guys are just launching, and now anything that goes into space, whether it's a satellite or what have you, a sensor, etc. Um, as long as it has some sort of form of Rocket Lab logo on it, then we are successful. And that's when I was just like, how plausible is something like that? Like, is that really? And so then that's what kind of like perked my interest in listening to this presentation. And so they start talking about satellite components, satellites as a service, applications, etc. And I start to recognize how much Rocket Lab had actually matured in terms of being able to build entire spacecraft. Not just the Photon anymore, but legitimately being able to deliver, big boy spacecraft. And when you start thinking about it, you read through these acquisitions. They had the Sinclair reaction wheels, which is Scotto's favorite thing, and Star Trackers, of course. You have the ASI flight software. This has now got us to the moon, people, literally. The Blue Ghost Firefly lander, ASI flight software. PSC separation systems, solar panels. Excuse me. Ooh. Sleepy boy. So in that respect, man, like you start thinking, you're like, oh shit, okay. And for those who don't know what reaction wheels are, it's basically it looks like a wheel, but it has weights on it pretty much that allows you to kind of gyro something in space. It uses the momentum within it to be able to kind of move things from different ways, because obviously you can't have forever sort of like rocket fuel or anything like that. A lot of these things are operated through reaction wheels or what have you. And once their engines are done, they're done, right? So this is where my eyes really started to get opening. So here it was. More than 38% of addressable launches in 2020 globally featured technology created by companies that are now part of Rocket Lab. So the fact that they were able to buy reaction wheels, the fact they were able to buy into solar panels, radios, star trackers, the flight software, I was like, oh shit, 40% pretty much are now pretty much Rocket Lab. And so the legacy of the companies that were acquired are things that were able to put the James Webb Space Telescope up there, Global Star Space Base constellation, OneWeb constellation, the NASA Psyche asteroid mission. Um, some of these are done, and some of these are to be done. Um, and so it just makes you think like these guys picked great companies that have great histories that demonstrate their execution ability. Yeah, here's a Long Beach, California, 10,000 square foot acquisition they have here. So we'll put that in there. Let's see. Oh, these were just like the types of missions that they're looking at. NASA's Escapade Mars mission. So this is something that's going to be launched on Blue Origin. So excited to see what happens with that. The Capstone Moon mission was to be able to kickstart the Artemis program to basically use telemetry and being able to figure out, how you can basically slingshot around the Earth and eventually get to the moon, etc. Venus is still on the table. Haven't gotten through that yet, but so we're pretty much we are done the capstone piece. It might be still ongoing. I don't know how much they're continuing to monitor at this point, or if they've kind of captured their objectives and are finished. But this Escapade mission was supposed to actually launch in the December timeframe, but due to the fact that Blue Origin's New Glenn got pushed, it got pushed back and now back and back. So fingers crossed that the New Glenn that's launching in the coming weeks will include the Escapade satellites. Enabling in-space manufacturing and re-entry vehicles. This is Varda, and it's been successful thus far. And then cryogenic fuel depots in orbit to be able to get us to Mars or other planets as well. Basically putting out fuel instead of having other cargo, you're only doing rocket fuel or ability to kind of have fuel depots is floating out in space. And so the hope is if you were to get to a checkpoint, you have that ability to kind of reutilize the cryogenic fuel to get you to where you're at or where you want to be, depending on how much you've already been traveling or what have you. You have this ability to kind of fuel up here. I feel like this is one that we were talking about earlier. Hold on. Research agreement with U.S. Transportation Command to explore Photon to establish on-orbit cargo depots. Yeah, I don't know if that's the same thing that we were kind of talking about earlier. But in terms of constellation, building global star space-based constellation, right? $100-some billion contract. And then going towards the middle, a Rocket Lab spacecraft delivered the first mission of NASA's Artemis program to return humans to the moon. I think that was Capstone, right? A moon rocket, moon engine, moon spacecraft, all designed and operated by Rocket Lab. Rocket Lab is the only small launch provider to design, build, and operate its own satellite in orbit, further expanding TAM. And I'm like reading this, I'm like, listen to this stuff. And so here was the Capstone mission. So to leverage basically the gravity around the Earth to be able to slingshot ourselves and mostly satellites into the orbit of the lunar surface to be able to get pictures. And it also has implications on what happens with Artemis as well. This one's pretty interesting because this is an ongoing partnership. The Varda one, which is basically trying to develop high value products, silicone chips, pharmaceuticals, etc., in zero gravity, and then be able to return it to kind of the world, and they've done that now on several occasions. And this LockSat piece is liquid oxygen, and so uh, basically being able to be a fuel depot for the future. How that works, not 100%. And then this is something that we've actually received more news on for Neutron, if I believe, the U.S. Air Force rocket cargo program. So that's potentially point-to-point use of a Neutron to be able to deliver cargo. Potentially, right? Nothing's guaranteed. So they talked about a little bit about Constellation, $143 million contract, 500 kilograms, etc. How Globalstar was the main contractor, and then MDA was really who helped with Rocket Lab, getting the contract going forward, and eventually getting ahead, in my opinion, when it comes to building constellations. It gives you that capability, right? And obviously, we know how big constellations might be in the future. Okay, so then they talked about pretty much very dominant strategies that they're looking to do and what they're building to be able to build that capability. So here you have Varda, Globalstar, MDA. Obviously, these are things that have all done well to be able to get these constellations up and going. And a lot of different other things as well, with just great customers, Black Sky, Astro, etc. A lot of different things. And so this is the reaction wheel business that they had bought from Sinclair, talking about how they pretty much were a heritage company and didn't have the ability to make nearly as many products as they want. And so they were able to scale this up to about 3,000 units a year. Now I think it's scaled even more so to 4,000 units per year. But don't quote me on that. That's something we'd have to double check with Scott. Scott would know that answer at this point. Flight software. This is what got us back onto the moon. If you guys are paying attention on that one. Separation systems, solar and structure solutions. So I wanted to say that I think this is either the biggest or the second biggest solar space solar provider in the world. And so you have high volume solar power production capabilities from the acquisition of Solero in January 2022. And then this utilizes in-house composite structure panel manufacturing, introducing new structures, business for satellites and launch vehicles. And so pretty badass in that respect. Go down. And this was what was really cool as well. That, for people that are in the solar business at this point, that most solar panels are like 20% efficient. Well, this alone was 33.3%. And I think it was thinner than a human hair. So being able to get some of these cool technologies in here while you can is a good thing. The fact that it's also lighter obviously helps when it comes to launch, because every kilogram matters. All right, so here are some radio frequency products. So you have S band, X band. Now they have Ka band and a few other bands in there as well. Yeah, I'm trying to think what. And then they get into Neutron. It's happening. All the different molds, the printers, the demand, the Hungry Hippo design. So initially, when they released this, I think it had like 3 or 4 fairings, so it kind of opened up like a rose. Now it's just the 2. It kind of just opens up like a hippo, which makes sense, right? Reduce the amount of hinges, etc. And then obviously they're continuing to reshape Neutron to make it as beautiful and sleek as possible. Getting some of these ridges, you can see that this is a little bit smoother. Um, although, yeah, one could say that this allowed the opportunity to potentially have more moon missions, but I guess that's something, or not moon missions, human deployment, because you guys see you could potentially remove these flanges and kind of put like a capsule or something on top, but it doesn't seem like they're willing or worth doing that right now. So pretty wide boy, 9 Archimedes engines in total. It'll be absolutely insane. This is what I keep referring to, not a capsule announcement. So I did actually ask Peter about this. Um, about 6 months after they presented this, rather, that it's not a capsule announcement. Um, Obviously, my ears perked up, and so it's something I've been checking regularly when it comes to the 10Qs and 10Ks, is to kind of read through and make sure that everything comes out well. This was another piece. Whoa, come on now. This was another piece that was interesting to me because I don't know much about rocket engines. So I've heard Elon and friends talk about it in the past, but it was really cool to kind of at least see the visuals here, specifically around, what types of engines and why. Um, so is this just the tank? Oh, hell yeah. Was this specifically for the engine? Yeah, secured engine testing site at Stennis. Awesome. Yeah, so they've been using that for a while. Here's the first view of the factory. Scroll. Yeah, we talked about these being able to potentially do point-to-point transport for Electron. And it's crazy to think how far we've come down this list, right? But I think they've broken out a few key things that they might have potentially deemed multiple steps to be able to get complete. And you really run into the financials at that point, because really the thing that I was looking at is, are these guys going to burn enough capital where it's, I'm diluted as a shareholder and I get zero benefit to the company? And at that point, that's probably when I joined. Definitely remember joining the electric, sorry, not electric, finance side, earnings side of the councils, or not council, the presentation. So I'm sure I may have done it in a, what am I trying to say? Anyway, let's see. Is there anything else? This was their SPAC presentation, in terms of how much launch they'd be kind of getting, and this is the addressable market. So this isn't in millions, it's in billions. So you could see at least 50 billion or so is going to be in the space systems piece, which is in black, and then the launch is going to be like more consistent. But obviously, I think it's harder to do than create satellites. Not saying it's a competition or anything like that. And I want to say, what is this? Wait a second. What did that say? There was a good Q&A section, but I just saw something. It might be because I'm sleepy. Okay, well, that's pretty much that. The thing I wanted to highlight next is probably the two acquisitions that they had gotten. So Minaric, and then you have the Geos acquisition. Sorry, I'm getting a lot of messages. And so with that, I think that there's a lot of opportunity still to kind of be mentioned, specifically around infrared and laser communication and being able to move data very fast at a very fast pace as well. So we'll probably leave that for a different topic. Unfortunately, we don't, or a different time. We don't have too much time before Amit kicks off. He's got 15 minutes before he talks about ASTS with Chris Patel. As noted, I want to make this public. Chris is too cool to make our Tuesday evening stream, but he is cool enough to talk about ASTS, the company he's bandwagoning on, today. So I want everybody to give Chris crap because he refuses to do podcasts with me. But if it's with the holy Amit talking about his new favorite stock, ASTS, he's all about it. So that's a bad joke. Let's see in here if there's anything of good importance. Let's see. Looks like markets are overbought and need to buy defense now, with Kramer making statements this evening. It's probably going to go down to zero or maybe more than. What is the projected 12-month revenue for Rocket Lab currently? I think they're on pace for like 550 million this year, and then they'll start to generate more once the Neutron rocket really starts to take off and running. And I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think if any of these acquisitions truly add to the bottom line as well. I'm sure they do. We got Big Dick Pat in here. We got Sense. Let's see. Never thought I'd be so happy to see the price pull back for the Rocket Labs. Price went almost to all your shares being in the cover. Man, sometimes we gotta be careful. And he probably didn't even write too close to the money either. It's just been, the stock has just been on an absolute tear. So I'm putting you to sleep. I put myself to sleep, dude. Last 5 minutes were rough. It is capable. It has not been completely certified, but it is capable. And I did actually have that conversation with Pete in April or May of last year. Is that's the 2Q earnings call? I referred directly to that slide, and I said, "Hey, you wrote that," and he's like, "Yeah, it's good to go. I mean, it needs to be qualified and everything like that, of course, but with its current design, I mean, it passes kind of the initial test to potentially try." We got BD Hustle Bros in here. We got Mottbox, Miss Frost, Curtis. What else? What did Gene say? I just missed it. Oh yeah, we got Hot Chris in the space race. I sound hurt. No, I just don't like how the ASTS guys respond to everything that I write on Twitter. I don't understand that one, but I think it's funny. Yeah, I know. The hell, Chris? Bad joke, be nice. Hey, so he promised me he would do it. And yes, he didn't sleep well or something. He needed some sleep. I get it. But he said he promised. And then he's okay. He doesn't say let's reschedule for tomorrow. He says, no, I'm too cool. I'm gonna do one with the Met. Let's see. All right, cool. Well, appreciate 83 of you guys. I'm gonna probably take a quick nap really quick and maybe rest my eyes. I'm trying to decide whether or not I'm gonna join in the ASTS call or not. Amit invited me, but who knows? I might just let them have his fun. And curious to hear. Maybe I'll just be trolling in the in the chat box like I always do. But yeah, sorry. Thought I had a little bit more energy in me, guys, but unfortunately, I'm snoozing myself to sleep at this point. It's not to say the content's not great. Rock Lab is obviously one of my favorite topics, but it's just been a long day, and I need to get better about getting to bed earlier. I end up staying up to way too late researching stocks and doing God knows what else. And at the end of the day, I never end up putting sleep as a priority. So I need to get better about that. So let's see. Cool. All right. I will I'll chat with you guys soon. Appreciate the 85 of you that still stayed on. And hopefully I've been trying my best to do more streams. So hopefully it's noticeable. And at the end of the day, hopefully we can get to maybe 4 or 5 times a week in some circumstances as well. And that's kind of the push and the goal. So with Palantir Weekly, Rocket Lab Weekly, it makes it very easy. I just have to come up with 3 other times on my own. So yeah, just keep your eyes peeled. I'll talk to you guys soon. Cheers.